The coin hits the table with a dull sound. Not the sharp ring of silver, something flatter. Dead. A merchant in Antioch lifts it between two fingers, turns it toward the light, scratches it with his thumbnail. The thin silver sheen flakes at the edge, exposing a darker core beneath. He doesn't say anything at first, just looks at the soldier across from him. The soldier shifts his weight. Armor creaks, sweat darkens the cloth under his collar. "This is what they paid you?" the merchant asks. The soldier nods once, short, mechanical. Outside, the street hums. Donkeys braying, iron tools clanging, a woman shouting prices for grain that changed twice that morning. The smell of dust and stale bread hangs in the air. The merchant drops the coin back on the table. It doesn't spin, just lands. "I don't take this." A pause, long enough for both men to understand what comes next. The soldier reaches for the hilt at his side. Not fast, not threatening, just inevitable. Because this isn't about one coin. It's about a system that stopped working. Quietly, then all at once. Here's the question. What happens when money still looks the same, but no longer is? And more importantly, how long before people notice? For nearly 2 centuries, that coin, the denarius, had been predictable. Weight, shine, sound. You could bite it, weigh it, stack it. Soldiers trusted it. Traders priced everything in it. Farmers stored it in clay jars buried under their floors. Under Augustus, it was about 95% silver, clean metal, stable. Then the edges started to blur. At first, almost no one noticed. A slight reduction, a bit more copper mixed in. The face of the emperor still stamped clean. Same size, same authority. It passed from hand to hand without question. But Rome had a problem it didn't want to admit. The empire was expanding, then holding, then stretching. Legions on every frontier, forts in the cold north, deserts in the east, roads to maintain, bureaucrats to pay, and taxes. Never enough, never fast enough. Raising taxes risked revolt. Cutting military spending risked collapse. So emperors chose the quieter option. They changed the money. By the time of Caracalla in the early 3rd century, silver content had dropped to roughly 50%. Still acceptable, barely. But then the pace accelerated. Under Gallienus, it fell below 5%. What remained was mostly bronze, washed in silver just thick enough to fool the eye at a glance. But not the hand, not the ear. Prices began to slip upward, then jump, then detach completely. A sack of grain no longer had a stable price. It depended on the coin you offered and who you were dealing with. Merchants hesitated. Soldiers demanded more pay. Some refused coin altogether. Barter crept back in, quietly at first, then everywhere. And once that shift begins, once people stop trusting money, you're no longer dealing with inflation. You're dealing with something far more dangerous. The coin doesn't fail all at once. It slips. First in the mint. Workers stand over furnaces, heat pressing into their faces, metal glowing dull orange. Silver is weighed, then adjusted. Not removed entirely, just diluted. Copper folded in, stirred, poured, stamped. The emperor's face comes out clean. That's what matters. Because the system doesn't run on metal, it runs on recognition. And Rome understood that, at least in the beginning. Debasement wasn't panic, it was policy. A controlled trade. Less silver per coin, more coins per treasury. Enough to pay soldiers, fund campaigns, keep the machinery moving. No announcement, no reform, just continuity on the surface. A soldier still receives 1 denarius, but the weight in his hand is slightly off. The sound when it hits another coin, muted. He notices, not immediately, but eventually. And when he does, he doesn't complain first. He adjusts. That's how monetary collapse begins, not with rejection, but with adaptation. Merchants start taking longer during transactions. A pause at the table. Coins spread out, not stacked. They scratch the surface with a knife. Hold it to the light. Compare it to older pieces if they still have them. The air changes. Not dramatically, subtly. Trust begins to cost time. And time in trade is friction. Prices don't jump overnight. They drift. Unevenly. Grain in one city rises faster than another. Imported goods spike first. Local goods lag. Some sellers move early, raising prices to protect themselves. Others wait, trying to hold customers. Confusion spreads before inflation becomes visible, because people aren't reacting to numbers. They're reacting to doubt. Once that doubt synchronizes, once enough participants start behaving as if the coin is weaker, the system shifts. Sellers demand more. Buyers rush to spend. And something critical happens in the background. The older coins disappear. You can still find them, just not in the market. They're hidden, under floors, inside walls, sewn into fabric, passed quietly within families, never offered in public exchange. The newer coins move, fast, everywhere. This isn't moral behavior, it's logical. Why spend something that still holds value when you can spend something that doesn't? And just like that, the entire visible economy begins running on inferior money. Quality drains out of circulation. What remains is volume. The state responds the only way it knows how. It pushes harder. More coins are minted. Faster, cheaper. Output rises, but value continues to thin. The treasury looks full, but the system underneath is hollowing. Then comes the intervention. Diocletian's edict, lists nailed to public spaces, prices fixed. Bread, meat, labor, transport. Hundreds of entries, each with a ceiling, each backed by threat. Execution if violated. The logic is brutal in its simplicity. Stop prices from rising and inflation ends. But the market doesn't negotiate with law. Merchants pull goods from stalls. Doors close earlier. Transactions move into side streets, behind doors, between known parties. The official economy shrinks. The unofficial one expands. Because reality doesn't disappear when you forbid it. It relocates. The state doubles down. Tax collectors become more aggressive. Not just counting coin, but demanding goods directly. Grain instead of currency, livestock instead of payment. Occupations begin to lock. A farmer's son becomes a farmer, not by choice, but by requirement. A blacksmith's son inherits the forge, whether he wants it or not. Mobility declines, not socially, structurally, because the system needs stability and it can no longer get it through voluntary participation. So it imposes it. Meanwhile, the military starts to shift. Pay is still issued, but its meaning erodes. A soldier stationed on a cold frontier receives coins that buy less each month. Supplies cost more. Local merchants demand premiums. Some refuse coin entirely. So the soldier negotiates. More pay, bonuses, land grants. The state complies by minting more, which feeds the cycle. Eventually, something deeper breaks. Not discipline, not immediately. Expectation. Because if pay doesn't translate into security, into food, into shelter, into future, then loyalty recalibrates. Not away from power, toward whoever can still provide value. Generals begin offering something the state cannot guarantee, tangible reward. Loot, land, protection, and slowly allegiance tilts. Not visibly, not formally, but enough. At the edges, desertion increases, recruitment slows. Units start behaving differently depending on who commands them. The army is still there, but it's no longer unified. At the same time, the countryside shifts. Tax demands continue, but the meaning of tax dissolves with the currency. A farmer told to pay in coin must convert real goods into something unstable. So he delays, or hides production, or leaves. Fields go quiet, not abandoned all at once, just less worked, less maintained. Yields drop. The state responds again, harder. More enforcement, less flexibility. But enforcement requires resources. And those resources depend on a system already weakening. Trade begins to fracture. Not collapse, fracture. Distance becomes risk. A trader moving goods across provinces no longer faces just physical danger, but pricing uncertainty. The value of payment can shift between departure and arrival, so routes shorten. Local exchange increases. Variety declines. Cities feel it first. Large populations require stable inflows. Grain, oil, materials. When those flows become inconsistent, the urban system strains. Markets thin out. Barter appears not as regression, but as adaptation. Grain for tools, oil for cloth. Slow, inefficient, but reliable. Because reliability replaces efficiency when money fails. Then comes the reform that seems like a solution. Constantine's gold solidus. High purity, consistent weight, trusted. It works, but only in part of the system. The state uses it, the elite use it. High-level trade stabilizes around it. But the broader population remains in the older system. Two currencies emerge. One stable, one not. Access becomes the dividing line. And over time, that line hardens. Wealth concentrates not just through power, but through monetary access. Because storing value becomes a privilege. For everyone else, inflation stops being a shock. It becomes a condition. People stop reacting. They adjust behavior permanently. Spend faster, save less, avoid long-term commitments, reduce trust in contracts, time horizons shrink. Infrastructure suffers, not because it collapses instantly, but because fewer people are willing to invest in something that requires stability. Maintenance slows, planning shortens, everything becomes more immediate, more reactive, less coordinated. And that's the final stage. Not collapse, disintegration. The empire still exists, roads still stand, armies still march, but the connections between systems weaken. Money no longer coordinates behavior. It no longer communicates value. And without that, everything else starts drifting, not together. Apartment. A printing press rattles in Berlin, 1923. Paper stacks slide off the edge, still warm. Ink smears on fingers. Outside, a man folds banknotes into his coat, thick bundles tied with string. He walks fast, not because he's late, because prices will change before he gets there. A loaf of bread in the morning, another price by noon, higher again by evening. The numbers lose meaning first, then the money. Different place, same sequence. In Weimar Germany, the state didn't shave silver off coins. It flooded the system with paper, faster than production, faster than trust could adjust. Workers were paid twice a day so they could spend before value slipped further. Savings dissolved. Debt vanished. Those holding real assets, land, factories, foreign currency, didn't just survive. They consolidated. Move forward. Zimbabwe, early 2000s. Price tags rewritten hourly. Shops run out of ink before they run out of goods. A cashier counts notes not by number, but by weight. Eventually, the local currency is abandoned entirely. People trade in dollars, rand, anything stable. The pattern doesn't depend on metal or paper. It depends on behavior. Reduce real value, increase supply, delay recognition, then lose control. Even in slower systems, modern ones, the same structure appears, just stretched over time. The United States cuts the final tie between the dollar and gold. No immediate collapse, no chaos, just a shift from anchored money into managed money. Since then, purchasing power erodes gradually, not visibly day to day, but over decades the change accumulates. The coin looks the same, the bill feels the same, but it buys less, always less. Different speeds, different tools, same underlying rule. When money becomes easier to create than value, the system begins to tilt. Not immediately, but predictably. A man counts his savings at a wooden table. Not quickly, one coin at a time. He stacks them, then pauses, then restacks them again, as if the act itself might hold their value in place. It doesn't. That's the first lesson. Money is not stable just because it looks stable. Rome proved that. So did Germany. So did every system that stretched its currency beyond what it could support. The change rarely announces itself. It accumulates, quietly. So you don't protect yourself by predicting collapse. You protect yourself by understanding structure. Start with this. Not all money is equal. Some forms hold value better under pressure. Others don't. The difference isn't obvious when things are stable. It becomes obvious when they aren't. Which leads to the second principle. Diversification is not about growth, it's about survival. If all your value sits in one system, one currency, one channel, you inherit its risk completely. Rome's citizens didn't plan for their coin to fail. Germans didn't expect wheelbarrows. Zimbabweans didn't expect abandonment. But systems change. Always. Third, liquidity matters more than yield when conditions shift. When trust breaks, the ability to move, exchange, adapt, that becomes more valuable than holding something that looks profitable on paper. And finally, watch behavior, not headlines. Prices lag. Policies mislead. But behavior, hoarding, faster spending, preference for real assets, that signals stress early. You won't hear it announced. You'll see it. In how people act. The coin lands on the table again. Same size, same face, same empire stamped into its surface. But it doesn't ring. That's how it starts. Not with collapse, but with a difference small enough to ignore. Until it isn't. Rome didn't fall in a moment. It drifted, away from trust, away from coordination, away from the thing that held it together, money. Every system believes it can manage that drift, control it, delay it. History suggests otherwise. The question isn't whether money changes. It always does. The question is, will you recognize it while it still matters?